Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for another insightful session in our Immersive Education webinar series. My name is Joanna Marioglu, and I'm part of the customer development team here at 3D Organon. We're delighted to have you with us. Today's webinar is titled Health Sciences IT Emerging Tech Labs, Redefining Health Sciences Education through XR. The event is powered by 3D Organon, and we're honored to be joined by our guest speaker, Alexi Zukas, Emerging Technology Labs Coordinator at the University of Pittsburgh. In this unique session, we will explore the perspective of health sciences IT and how immersive technologies are being successfully implemented to enhance teaching, learning, and simulation across health sciences education. With an 8-year background in teaching and technology, Alexi oversees the management, scheduling, and support of two emerging technology labs at the University of Pittsburgh. He also supports medical and manikin simulation programs for the School of Medicine. Through his work, Alexi has helped bring XR technology into the hands of hundreds of students and faculty, integrating it into nearly 24 courses across 5 health sciences schools, as well as undergraduate arts and sciences programs. Today, he will be sharing real-world insights from his experience implementing XR technologies and how immersive tools are transforming health sciences education, along with practical strategies for enhancing teaching. Alexi, thank you so much for being with us today. We're excited to learn from your experience. Whenever you're ready, please go ahead and begin with your presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody at 3D Organon for having me on to this wonderful webinar. I really appreciate the invitation here. And hello to everybody across the world. I know we have a lot of people from Germany, Ukraine, Greece, UK, Canada, South Africa, the US, UAE, Colombia, Australia, Taiwan, Ethiopia, France, Malaysia, Brazil, Pakistan, Spain, and all those other wonderful countries out there. So again, thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to be attending my talk here. Um, as mentioned, my talk is going to be about the emerging technology labs here at the University of Pittsburgh Health Sciences. Just giving a little bit of context about, what we do, how we accomplish what we did, what we're planning on doing, and how we implemented some of the emerging technology that we have implemented successfully. So a little bit about me. Again, my name is Alexi Zukas. I am the Emerging Technology Labs Coordinator for the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine and the rest of the health science schools with Health Sciences IT. I am an alumnus from the University of Pittsburgh, graduating in 2022 with a BS in Physics and Astronomy. I have a formal IT support background dating to about 2019. Used to be a student worker, went into a full-time tech support position, and then eventually became the coordinator for the ETLs. For a little while, I was a physics teacher at one of the local high schools, so I do also have some teaching background, which I think would help me a little bit with integrating the technology a little bit better to give that extra teaching perspective to all of the faculty that maybe want to use the equipment that we have. I'm also a massive nerd, so you can kind of see I built my own computer. I love going to Renaissance fairs. Yeah, just so big dork basically overall. To get started, there might be some people who might not necessarily be familiar with the emerging technology labs or the concept of what an emerging technology lab is. So the mission that we have is to offer students, faculty, and staff of all the health science schools at Pitt, as well as the undergrad schools and beyond, new, unique, inclusive, and immersive ways to learn medical content. So that can be anywhere from integrating innovative technology like VR headsets and AR headsets into the curricula of university courses, providing alternative and supplemental ways of study to students via, open access lab spaces, assisting in making Pitt Health Sciences a leader in utilizing emerging technology, and then as well as gaining trust of customers by offering high quality experiences to eventually expand the labs and their offerings. A little bit about the spaces that we handle. We currently operate two emerging technology labs for the University of Pittsburgh Health Sciences. So one of them is on the 7th floor of Scaife Hall. It is the Anatomy Emerging Technology Lab, and the other one is inside of the Falk Library on the mezzanine floor for the Health Sciences Libraries. Excuse me. But we offer a wide variety of technology. We have a very robust knowledge base. The locations are autonomous and simple to use. And we also offer demos, trainings, outreach, loaning, and learning event support as well. Beyond that, we offer some simulation support for the Wiser Mannequin Simulation Program, as well as the School of Medicine Standardized Patient Program. And we're also planning on expanding that support into the new emergency room slash ICU simulation space for Wiser, as well as the Fifth and Halkett simulation spaces that are going to be opening up sometime in the next couple of months here. As far as the technology that we offer, again, the goal is to provide new, unique, and immersive learning opportunities to faculty, staff, and students of all the health science schools. And in doing so, we have a wide variety of technology that we want to supply students with. Um, so as far as software is concerned, one of the primary softwares we do use is 3D Organon. It's a fantastic, anatomy tool for gross human anatomy for doing, some dental work, for doing ultrasound. It's a very good workhorse in that regard. But we're also supporting OMS, GigXR. We have 2 Anatomage tables. We use Complete Anatomy that is funded through the university. And then a couple of free softwares. We have Maloka, Nanome, and then a surgery simulation for Wraith VR, as well as a surgery simulator ER for a little bit more of a tech demo for the software. It's basically a game where we're playing as a fake surgeon. Um, but I digress. As far as hardware is concerned, we have 3 MetaQuest 2s, we have 22 MetaQuest 3s, we have 3 Vive Pro 2s attached to high-powered computers, 16 Microsoft HoloLens 2s, 2 Anatomage tables, and over 160 iPads, all available for students to use for the purposes of learning and teaching. So a little bit about the story so far. In August 2023, we basically inherited 10 HoloLenses and 160 iPads, plus an Anatomage table from the former Office of Emerging Technologies after they were sort of dissolved in prior to 2023, mainly just because everybody had some better opportunities come up for them. So they went on to better opportunities. We inherited all the technology, and we basically were trying to figure out what to do with it. So around October, we had the School of Pharmacy reach out to us and asked us to host the first learning event inside of the Emerging Tech Labs. It went very successfully, and then from there, word started getting out about this new emerging technology space in the School of Medicine that people are starting to use. From there, we began hosting outreach events with the nonprofit Empower House, which helped disenfranchised youth of the Pittsburgh area, as well as the first learning event within the Dietrich School of Arts and Sciences for undergrad biology. From there, it expanded into more courses with Dietrich, more courses with the School of Pharmacy, as well as the School of Medicine BMP cranial nerve course, which we'll get into a little bit more, but essentially it's teaching about the cranial nerves of the human body, as well as some more outreach events on top of that. In spring 2025, we opened our second emerging technology lab location inside of the Falk Library, as well as health sciences leadership tours, eventually causing demand of the space to triple, and at this point, not even quadruple and quintuple from what we were originally anticipating. Summer 2025 included collaborations with the media team on pharmacy, clinical medicine, and neurology projects, as well as a summer pre-med program. And again, the Dietrich summer anatomy course was once again hosted inside of the ETL. From there, this past fall, we expanded offerings integrating across 3 separate health science schools, created robust knowledge bases, and we are still continuing support for public use of equipment. And we also began point-of-care ultrasound kit loaning. This spring, we have expanded support up to 5 out of 6 of the health science schools inside the University of Pittsburgh, from the School of Medicine, School of Nursing, School of Pharmacy, School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences, and School of Dental Medicine. We have collaborated with Stanford Chariot, we have collaborated with Stanford Chariot to provide students with an opportunity to use VR as a way to help extremely anxious children get vaccines and make sure they're not as anxious when they're receiving them. As well as we provided a VR ISS experience for Pitt's recently announced Trivedi Space Institute for biomedicine as well. So we have quite a lot of stuff going on over these past few years. Here's just some photos of the events that we took over the first couple of years that we were in operation. So again, the Empower House event is on the left on those both photos. So you can see, fairly large group of people inside of the ETL, as well as some older pieces of software that we no longer have on the right-hand side for undergrad, the anatomy course, as well as the School of Pharmacy use of the space for the cardiovascular system. The School of Pharmacy is actually about to have their their 3rd year with us this upcoming fall for that same cardiovascular course. Now, it took a long way to get here, and reason for that is new tech is hard. There's a very large disparity between primary customer bases, right? So in this day and age, Gen Alpha is starting to grow up into, grade school and high school. They're growing up in the age of AI and XR, and this is probably going to be the only mention of AI in this entire presentation. But they're growing up with AI and XR as a regular concepts. Most households these days, I would imagine, have a VR headset, either a low cost Meta Quest headset or a PlayStation VR headset or something like that. But they see it as a video game console or a toy or something like that. Millennials and Gen Z, like myself, show more enthusiasm for learning new technology. We're more open to trying these new pieces of tech, integrating this new tech into our curricula and ideas. We just really want to see what it does. And then the boomers and Gen X generation show preference for tried and true teaching methods, more so of traditional lecture-based settings, group studies, and that type of thing. The other thing too is that usability exists on a range, right? So the Anatomage table is extremely easy to use. For example, it's basically just a Windows computer under the hood with huge touchscreens. So if you've ever used a tablet, you can just tap on the screen and it'll automatically start to load things in, or you can plug in a keyboard and mouse and use a keyboard and mouse. On the other hand, if you have a VR headset, you know, you're probably aware that it's somewhat expensive to start purchasing one. The cheapest MetaQuest headset on the market is about $300 up to $3,500 for the most advanced XR headsets on the market from Microsoft HoloLens and the Apple Vision Pro. VR, in my experience, is easy to teach, mainly because you have controllers with the headsets for the most part. And people are more used to using controllers since, again, they're very similar to video game consoles. So, especially for Gen Z, Millennials, and Gen Alpha, we grew up with video game consoles. We sort of know how to use video game controllers. So, it's very easy to sort of apply that, pre-learned knowledge to using these headsets in academic contexts. When compared to AR, AR is kind of difficult because there's not really a lot of AR headsets on the market that have good gesture controls or good options when it comes to registering your movement for gesture controls. So we found that whenever we're trying to use something with the Meta Quest headsets or our Microsoft HoloLenses with gesture controls, it's very difficult for people to start using the software properly, just because the headset isn't quite registering what the person is trying to accomplish, whether that be clicking or dragging something or something like that. So um, that brings sort of to the next point, which is accessibility. The technology is meant to be accessible for those that want to use it, right? With this new technology, there's a certain amount of motor skills that need to almost be required in order to operate all the pieces of equipment properly. Um, Even with traditional cadavers, you're still standing and sitting for long hours. You're hovering over a body, you're smelling formaldehyde. You can get tired of it after a certain period of time. Um, so that's one of the downsides to traditional cadaveric dissections and teaching and things like that. As far as the anatomage table, you don't really need a whole lot of dexterity required. Again, it's basically a big touch screen. You can also plug in a keyboard and mouse, but it still requires standing. So if you have somebody that comes in with a wheelchair or something like that, they might have some issues looking at the table because it's just sitting so high above the ground. VR headsets are the most immersive. And they also don't require their user to be standing. A lot of the times when we're hosting these VR events, the primary audience is actually just sitting down to minimize the risk of motion sickness. But the downside of VR headsets is that, again, there is a substantial risk to motion sickness depending on what you're doing inside of the headset. If there's a lot of activity like moving around and things like that, your central nervous system and the balancing system in your body they don't like to talk to each other a whole lot. So essentially, what happens is you wind up getting dizzy and headaches and things like that because your body thinks you're moving when you're actually not. Um, Beyond that, VR headsets also have some issues for people with glasses and large hairstyles, mainly because you have to put your glasses either inside the headset or you have to take them off in order to be able to see properly inside of the headset. As well as usually you also have a large overhead strap and a ratcheting system on the back of most headsets that might interfere with these larger hairstyles. AR is the least intrusive and usually also does not require the user to be standing, but it also brings up the similar and same issue with VR headsets where people with large hairstyles and glasses may have a problem utilizing the headset. We haven't really had anybody get motion sick by using an AR headset, mainly because you can still see the environment around you and your brain registers that as such. But there is still a non-zero risk of motion sickness just because you are looking at digital models inside of the real world. So also keep that in mind if you're planning on integrating that. Now, despite all of these missions of the ETL and despite all of the opportunities we have to integrate it, there's never going to be a reason to get rid of physical media, and that's not our goal. Um, you know, there's no resolution or performance limitations when working on physical specimens. Whereas in VR, you have processing limitations of the headsets. It can only do so much. It has precision limitations based off the pull rate of the headset. So it might be able to only track your hand so much or so quickly. And there's nothing more accurate to anatomy and how humans operate than other humans. So, AI patients are great, but they're never going to replace, your traditional standardized patient when it comes to acting out patient scenarios, clinical rotations, and real cadavers where, you're getting your hands inside of a real person to learn anatomy at face value, physically in person. So again, our goal isn't to replace these forms of media, but supplement them. And we're supplementing them in many, many, many different ways. So again, here in 2026, we have a SHRS School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences undergrad TA using 3D Organon to host multi-user sessions for recitation. So they were reviewing the muscular system of the muscles and tendons inside of your arm and how they operate. Again, we had a big outreach event earlier with the Trivedi Space Institute launch, where we had both our Senior Vice Chancellor and Dean of the Medical School, Anantha Shaker, as well as the Pennsylvania Governor, Josh Shapiro, experience our VR headsets firsthand. And then here's a photo in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there to show off the School of Medicine's BMP course, again, showing that lower limb cranial nerve function to course instructors. Beyond that, no, though, there are also a whole bunch of ways we are using this technology beyond some photos that I've taken. So we've been content capturing on the Anatomosh table for use in hybrid SHRS neuro courses. People have been creating their own models on the table, uploading it to their own customized slides. We've worked with the media team to produce those pieces of content. We've also been working with VR video production and the media team for active bystander training and optical disorders to simulate people who might be encountering microaggressions inside of the workplace. So, for example, you could be a patient at bedside, and the active bystander might want to say something to a doctor that's not giving you the proper treatment for one reason or another due to microaggressions or other things like that, as well as for the optical disorder side of things, you can do things like simulate optical disorders inside of VR headsets very well because it's literally a first-person perspective of a digital environment. So um, essentially, you can overlay any sort of optical disorder you want on the headset and simulate what a person with that disorder would be seeing in real time. Beyond that, we used 3D Organon a couple of weeks ago with the School of Dental Medicine to showcase anatomy of the upper airway. So we had a faculty instructor, meet up with us, create a pro section inside of the software, and then share that out to a student body of about 22 students simultaneously to showcase that. School of Nursing is preparing to train for what I'm dubbing internally as a simulation week. So they're going to be doing a patient simulation week in the first or second week of April, essentially running through postnatal care for women that have just given birth to their child, and some additional simulations on top of that. Again, we're piloting a program for using VR to calm exceptionally anxious young vaccine recipients. We have a collaborative project right now that I can't really talk too much about between the School of Dental Medicine and School of Nursing to view scans of pro sections in VR. We have, again, those point of care ultrasound kits to give to School of Medicine faculty and students. They're allowed to rent them out with us. They can take them out for up to 5 days at a time. And then we also have a whole bunch of outreach programs as well, located in local high schools and in mid-student days across the city of the greater Pittsburgh area. We have a local high school event in the middle of March coming up, as well as some mid-student days towards the middle and end of April that we're also going to be hosting for on top of that. So with all that said, we have been doing a ton of work, and the integration that we've been doing is fantastic. But for those faculty that are watching this and they're thinking, well, this looks all well and good, but how can I potentially integrate this to the best of my ability? Or, how can I talk to my IT department to, integrate this the best way that I can. Well, this is how I would usually see it. Faculty should still have control over what they want to show inside of their course. So, for example, I would love to see faculty creating lesson plans and assignments and assessments using the emerging technology lab resources that we have, whether that be creating pro sections, creating quizzes, creating assessments, creating worksheets to do with the technology, assigning students to come to the ETL in their free time to look at the technology that we have and look at models and things like that. We would also recommend, if you're planning on integrating this technology, to have a dedicated session at the start of the semester to provide hardware training to all the students, mainly because, again, not every person has used a VR headset before. Sometimes it's foreign to people. So they should have at least, 15, 20 minutes just with the hardware to get used to how to operate it and things like that. The perfect world would have an entire first session dedicated to learning how to use the equipment before going into the additional steps of, hey, this is what we're going to be doing for anatomy, for patient simulation, that type of thing. The other thing too is that if you're going to be utilizing these resources, they should be used regularly, especially if there's a lot of content to cover in your course, mainly because if you don't use it regularly, students aren't going to be remembering how to use this technology. So if you have them come in, one time, two times, three times a semester or per year, they might forget how to use the headsets the second time around um, when they're coming back into the emerging technology labs. Past that, I would love to have dedicated technical staff present in the lab to provide support if needed. So part of the view of the IT department that we have is that we're very dedicated to the learning events that we host, right? So we want to make sure everything runs super smoothly. And since this is a brand new piece of technology, there's a lot that can go wrong. Dedicated technical staff can assist with solving those problems if they appear. Finally, we would like to see students using emerging technology lab resources to study course content during recitations and independent study. So that can be anywhere from having open hours inside of the emerging technology labs that we have to students booking time inside of the ETL, renting out equipment for themselves, things like that. We've gotten there over very, very long periods of trial and error. So we've been working on the emerging technology labs for 2 to 3 years at this point, right? Um, and we've sort of learned three main points that I want to get into. The first is academic buy-in. A lot of the times, like I said at the start of this presentation, XR is seen as a toy and not a tool. And it was primarily marketed in 2016 when it was first becoming popular as a toy. So you had the VR headsets like the Vive Pro and the Oculus Rift that are coming out, and they're like, hey, this is a fantastic gaming device that you can plug into your computer. We don't necessarily have to see it that way anymore. VR technology has come an extremely long way in the last 10 years where, you can utilize the fact that XR is seen as a toy because it's flashy. People like the fact that there's something new and fancy inside of their building, right? So you can create dynamic outreach events with open houses, workshops, student orientations, and word of mouth to drive interest in the hardware. Because hey, there's VR in the room, right? It's cool. You can put a headset on, you can go to a different location. Um, the other thing too, though, is that if you want to use it as a tool, I would probably recommend including some sort of instructional designer or somebody from an instructional design team in course consults to show academic value in using XR as a tool for teaching. Again, there's so much more you can do with XR besides just playing games with it. You can do immersive classroom experiences. You can, make pro sections. You can view models in 3D. You can have animations. There's so much you can accomplish. The second problem that we're having is faculty buy-in. So many faculty in most of our health science schools are also full-time physicians. And because of that, they don't really have a whole lot of time to learn how to use the technology. So again, they should control what they want to see in their course. And part of that is, do they want to have XR in their course, right? Well, most of the courses, most of the resources in the emerging technology labs include content creation tools, right? So the anatomage table, you can make pro sections. The 3D Organon content creation tools are fantastic as well. You can make pro sections and models that way inside of the software. So the solution to that, what I would recommend is probably providing flexible training options, device learning, and knowledge bases for self-teaching. Faculty have, this super, super slim budget of time, and we have to take advantage of that the best we can, right? So try to be as flexible as you can when it comes to teaching faculty how to use this technology. Or if you're a faculty member yourself, your free time could be a great opportunity to learn how to do this. And then lastly, at Pitt, student experience is so important to us. Student feedback drives innovation. We have OMET forms that get sent out after every class is over, which are basically student surveys that students fill out to tell faculty how well they thought they ran the course, things like that. But XR provides hands-on opportunities for learning, which also increase student participation and performance. We also have a faculty member currently writing a white paper regarding student performance using emerging tech lab resources at Pitt, which can further prove that even more. So to make sure these students have a positive experience using this technology, you know, have an expert on hand. Make sure that the tools that you're getting are easy to use. Make sure that their experience is as smooth and pleasant as possible. If the students are happy, everybody's happy, right? At the end of the day, they're the ones that drive feedback, drive innovation, and essentially, they do pay tuition to use this technology at the university that you're teaching it at, right? So they might as well make the most out of their money and have a good experience while they're doing it. One more thing that I want to talk about is the Gartner hype cycle. So the real quick of this, because I don't want to bore you guys with a super long conversation about what exactly this means. Essentially, it basically means a hype graph versus time, right? So whenever you introduce something new, you're going to have this huge boost in um, in hype, essentially, or inside of expectations, right? So when you first start introducing emerging technology, people are going to get word of it and they're going to say, hey, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do this? Can I do that? And after you tell them, well, yes, it can, or like, no, we can't do this. So for example, integrating AI patients into standardized patient practices, for example, people are going to finally lose interest a little bit. And then after a certain point, they realize the actual applications of VR and it sort of trends upward from here. The reason why I'm showing this chart is because this is sort of the trajectory that most integrations we have done so far have followed. In other words, we've seen this very large initial peak of hype followed by a drop in usage and interest. And then from there, it has slowly built up to a more sustainable, more solid foundation of usage inside of the emerging technology labs. So if there's any technical folk on this webinar that are planning on integrating this into their school, just be aware there will be a large bump followed by a lull and then more sustained growth. And that really goes for anything new that you're trying to integrate, right? The last thing that I want to talk about is where we're planning on going. So we've had tremendous growth over the last 2.5 years, but this is sort of the game plan for what we want to do even further into the future. So we want to get additional staff to provide permanent presences in the ETL and allow for simultaneous learning events. Right now, I'm the main person that handles 2 emerging tech labs, but because of that, I can't handle more than 1 learning event at the same time. So we would love to have additional staff have a permanent presence to make sure that everybody can use the technology without problems. We want to continue dynamic outreach through open houses and outreach events to drive interest, mainly because if you don't keep pushing forward with the idea that XR is a great tool, people are going to forget about it. We have this beautiful lab, but if people don't come to it, what's the point, right? So you got to keep making sure the word gets out. We want to pilot additional programs with other health science schools and courses. Again, with School of Nursing, we're doing a patient simulation week. With the School of Pharmacy, we have that cardiotherapy course. We have that VR vaccine program that we're piloting. So the more programs we pilot, the more opportunities we have to get outreach done and to converse with more folks throughout the university community to sort of cement this technology in place. We want to expand the fleet of devices to accommodate for larger cohort sizes. So we do have a very large cohort of headsets already in the form of about 40 VR and AR headsets combined. But most cohorts at Pitt for the health sciences are anywhere between 150 and 300 students. So if you want to have the entire cohort working this software at the same time, you need to make sure you have a large amount of headsets. Otherwise, you're going to have to either break it up into subcomponents or you're going to have to break it up into small group settings or something like that. We want to make sure we have enough devices for everybody to use them at the same time. And then lastly, we want to diversify the types of support that the emerging technology labs provide, right? So if we just bank on one piece of technology and that piece of technology falls through, there's nothing we can really do about that. that there goes the emerging technology labs. So we want to make sure that even if we have this new piece of technology, we want to make sure it's going to be used. We want to make sure we have alternatives. It's called emerging technology for a reason, right? For every good piece of technology that is integrated and stays integrated, 10 fail, right? So you have to make sure that you have all these different types of technology that you're offering, and some of them will eventually stick, but some of them naturally will go by the wayside. For example, the Microsoft HoloLens 2 has stopped production formally this past couple of years, and they're not planning on creating a HoloLens 3. So we have 16 HoloLens 2s. They still work great, but we won't be able to get any more, and we won't be able to get any sort of really new pieces of software for it because people are going to stop developing for that piece of equipment. So those are sort of all of my advices that I have. But at this point, I actually see in the chat there's contact details right here on this slide. But thank you so much for having me on for this webinar. If you have any sort of more advanced questions about what the labs offer or anything shown, feel free to reach out to me directly via my work email. And I now open the floor to questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Alexi, for that fantastic presentation. We can move now into the Q&A portion of the session when you can ask any question you'd like in our Q&A part. Feel free to type them in and we can have further discussion on the subject. So I see in our chat that there has been a message saying from Adrian, how much dedicated technical staff do you need for a group of, let's say, 20 people doing VR at the same time? If I extrapolate from my own VR experiences in arcade halls, you need full-time tech support to provide a smooth experience for just a few students. There's always something that goes wrong or needs fixing adjustment.
Excellent question. So usually when I'm hosting my small group sessions inside of the ETL, it's about 10 students or less at a time. And usually I can handle that just fine without any problems. Um, I would say probably at least one technical staff person per 10 students seems to be working pretty nicely. Any more than that, you're kind of going to be running around struggling, trying to get all your hands together to helping individual students that might be having weird problems. So it doesn't necessarily need to be full-time technical staff either. It could also be student workers, right? Again, there's nobody better to show off this technology and this software than other people who are of a similar age. So if you have some student workers that want to get hired or something like that to help out with this type of technology, that would be fantastic. Um, you know, I, I would, yeah. So I would probably say about 10-ish people per technical staff member would be what I would say in a perfect world. Again, I've run sessions upwards of 20, 22 people at a time. It gets a little more hazy at that point.
Great, thank you. So we have another question as well. What is the biggest shift that you've seen in students' engagement since introducing XR?
The biggest shift in engagement. I have always loved when somebody puts on a VR headset for the first time. Because if someone has come into the emerging technology lab and they have no idea what they're expecting, you put this new piece of technology on them, and again, the natural concept of VR is that you're put into a different environment, right? So students that aren't used to that just have their eyes and their faces completely light up when they put on the headset for the first time. And I think it's that innate enthusiasm and wonder that a student experiences when they put on a headset that drives them to be more engaged inside of the software or inside of the hardware as well. So, you know, it's just a natural hype that somebody has when they put on a headset. They like using the equipment. They like to do what they're seeing. Um, so that it just sort of naturally drives engagement from there. They're more likely to engage in something that they're interested in, right? So that's what I would probably have to say.
Great. Going to hardware questions, we have a question from Mike. What do you expect in technical wear on headset replacement and, time of replacement and so on?
So our usual hardware cycle at the Health Sciences is between 4 to 5 years for laptops. I would usually anticipate a little bit less time for VR headsets, mainly because the technology is accelerating as far as development is concerned. So I would say probably between 3 and 4 years for headsets, depending on how heavily they're used, depending on how many updates there are in hardware, as well as development cycles that might be specific to a specific piece of technology, right? So if there's a new piece of hardware that comes out, um, you know, people might be developing exclusively for that new piece of hardware. You might want to use it, but don't have that new piece of equipment.
Great. Moving on, have you been able to use XR imaging for DICOM image analysis, and how's the user's experience?
We have in some limited capacity. So we were given some test scans with the School of Dental Medicine to view some DICOM scans with 3D Organon on the high powered PC headsets that we have, and it was a very good experience. The image is super clear. You can cut into the DICOM scan to look at the inside of a model if you wanted to do that. You can customize the resolution of the scan. You can look at the different levels of graininess about it. You can customize the color of the scan depending on what wavelengths you're trying to accomplish, anything like that.
So we have an unusual question here. Do musicians ever come to learn anatomy?
So not musicians specifically. But that is sort of an interesting point because we are focused on health science schools, but we have had a couple of undergrad instructors come to us that are not relevant to health sciences, but are maybe doing a course on the digital human or how humans get digitized into the virtual world in 2026. Um, so we have done a couple of learning events for instructors in that regard, where I'm doing other similar conversations with them, where I just basically showcase what we're doing inside of the emerging tech labs, how they do scans, that type of thing.
Great. So would you say there are people from arts and sciences as well joining to check out the experience?
Definitely, yeah. Like I said, there's a couple of faculty from undergrad that are interested in using the technology, but we primarily cater to the biological sciences. So that's where our primary customers usually come from.
Great. Moving on to a question from Christian. Do you see Arbor XR or any other management company? What are your thoughts on Meta HMS being discontinued?
So we did used to use Arbor XR, and then they announced just before that that Meta is going to a paid HMS where you have to pay for the HMS before you use a third-party HMS as well. So we actually canceled our contract this year with Arbor XR, and then 6 months later they announced, oh, Meta HMS is going to be free starting in about 10 days. Um, so it was kind of a bit of a kick in the teeth for us because we're like, well, this Arbor was fantastic. We just canceled a contract because they're having us charge for an HMS now. But now that they're not doing that, we need a reason to go back to Arbor. Um, so it's going to be an interesting conversation to have with leadership here, being like, hey, HMS. I don't want to say HMS is necessarily being discontinued because it's going to become free for limited use. Our use case with the amount of headsets that we have actually benefit from HMS being limited in features. So really, we're just using it to onload software that we can't install from a first party perspective, and then from there, it's mainly just management of devices, making sure it's updated and things like that. So I actually view it as a positive that HMS is sort of being put on a long-term service channel. But it would also let us go back to using Arbor XR, which is fantastic. Like I said, we've used them before. We were really happy with what they offered.
Great. And now we have a question regarding our Metaverse module. How does a multi-person VR session look like?
So inside the software, you can create a room essentially with however many people that you want to create the room with. We have done it with upwards of 20 people, and it has worked pretty well. But you can have everybody inside of the same room to join the same session. You can have everybody in pass through to look at the same model inside of the actual space that you're standing in. Usually, the instructor takes control of that session, and they either have their avatar on or off, depending on what context that they want to use it for. You have a user list. The instructor can control what everybody sees at the same time. They can point things out. They can draw things like that. Um, And then if there's somebody that wants to join the session but can't because they're sick, so they're staying stuck at home for some reason, they can also join the session remotely. So they can have a digital avatar load in, or have the instructor's digital avatar load into their headset, and they can also view the same session simultaneously as well. So there's not necessarily a spatial constraint when it comes to these multi-user sessions. It's mainly just, can you get however many headsets you want up to speed in the time that you have? But the multi-person session has been great so far. We've really liked that feature.
That is great. Moving on, there is another question about any data center, any data that you might have on improved student metrics when using XR, better test scores, improved recall, and so on.
So at Pitt specifically, we don't have any hard metrics quite yet. That said, we are working with our instructional design team this year to get some white papers out about some better test scores and improved recall and performance. I am aware of some other papers that are out on the internet that will show that using XR does cause students to have better test scores and improved recall, mainly because they're working with their hands and experiencing the content from a first person perspective and in 3D. So it's more immersive, more accurate, things like that.
Great. There's another question that I would like to add a few things on this one. Do you think 3D organon anatomy should have a dental module separate from general anatomy and X-ray imaging to appear more focused?
So funny you say that, because the latest update of 3D Organon does have a dedicated
Exactly.
dental module.
Exactly.
So yeah, I encourage you to have a look at that if you haven't already.
That is a very nice and new introduction into dental anatomy. I think dental schools might find it very helpful. Um, so for multi-users, the main who creates the room might be using premium package. How about standard can join the rooms? So I can answer that as well if you'd like. The premium license is the one that creates the rooms, and that can choose whoever joins, and the standards do join but cannot create the room. So yes. Now, let me see if we have any further questions. Which features of 3D Organon have the most utility in teaching basic anatomy to nursing students? Asks Dave.
Yeah, so I would say the gross human anatomy module has the most offerings for basic anatomy for nursing students, because inside of that module you can customize basically whatever you want about the human body. You can select different organs and structures on your model depending on what you want to pick and what organ system it's a part of. It can show you pathologies about the organ system that you picked. You can compare with photos of actual cadavers inside of the software. It'll tell you information about whatever structure you picked. Um, and you can customize between, I think it's one of 15 or so different organ systems inside of the software, depending on what you really want to focus on. And you can turn on and off those organ systems in any combination you want, as well as whatever region of the body that you want to focus on any specific day. So that would probably be what I would say for basic anatomy. Organon, we've been using Organon as sort of our flagship tool for gross human anatomy when someone comes in and asks to use our resources for it.
Great. And how much freedom do you have to design a session? Like, can I be inside the middle ear? There's a question. Would you like to elaborate, or is that something that faculty members or teaching members are doing?
Yeah, so when you design a session, you can essentially make the 3D equivalent of a slide deck. I believe in the software they're called scenes, but every scene that you create, you can customize as your own, your own 3D model, right? And that includes most components of 3D Organon. So again, that could be, an organ system. That can be a arm, a leg, part of the head. You can make parts of the airway transparent, for example, like dental did in our school. Um, Part of the microscopy feature in 3D Organon is actually a view of the inside of the ear. So you can blow that up to however big you want it, and actually, see the cochlea and the hammer, the anvil, the inca, the incus, all that stuff inside of the ear. On top of that, in a really really nice like sliced X-ray view. So basically, full freedom is what I would say. If you want to customize it, you can customize it.
Great. If I can add to this question, are you in cooperation with faculty members to create such lesson plans, or is it something that you may do in your own time in the lab?
It's mainly been faculty that have been using that feature for the time being.
Mhm.
Naturally, we would like to help them create their content if they're struggling with, finding something specific inside of the software or things like that. We're mainly there to provide the tools for the faculty, and the faculty are the ones that are creating their own content. So they might consult us on, hey, where's this organ system, or hey, where's this organ in this software? Mainly because sometimes organs can be, defined as being in more than one system at the same time. So things might not be located specifically where they're expecting them to be located and things like that.
Great, thank you. And moving on to a question from Christian. When will authentication of applications be seamless? Presently, it's difficult to implement the use of 3D Organon when the keys reset with each new user of the headsets.
So here's what I can say about that. There is currently authentication per user with 3D Organon. Um, and we found a workaround that works for us at Pitt for our use case. What we wound up doing is, since we provision so much of our technology by headset, we basically made general accounts for all of the headsets that we have, and then just made each headset have its own general account that it signs into. So it's technically provisioning per headset, even though you are signing up per user. I haven't also played around with it, but I know you can register specific Quest headsets with codes involving specific registration to that dedicated headset. So that if you want to assign, a 3D Organon license to a headset for somebody to use, you can take a license away from a different headset and assign it to a specific one at a specific time. Um, I hope I'm saying that right because we don't really use that feature, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Um, Let me check again. So this is a technical issue, I would say, that our support team fully covers whenever we have these questions brought back to us. That is something that can be faced, and our support team is here and ready to face it whenever. I hope that this has been the case with your institution as well.
Yeah, definitely. The support has been phenomenal with 3D Organon. We noticed an idiosyncrasy with, I think it was like the definition of um pneumonia or something like that inside of one of the
Yes,
pathologies.
yes.
Reached out to them and they've got it fixed within like 24 hours. It was a fantastic turnaround time for an issue. So that was nice to see. But yeah, anyway, Christian, like I said, we provision per headset, so I would probably recommend making general accounts, and that way students don't have to sign in with their own account when they're using 3D Organon. They can just pick up a headset, throw the headset on, and use that specific software. Um, the downside of that is you can't really track end user metrics with, if the specific person is using 3D Organon on this specific day. It's kind of a trade-off whether you either have ease of integration with a lot of headsets or have your students have individual metrics. So it's kind of a bit of a trade-off there.
Great. We have another question. Do you think the platform is affordable for medical students in low-income countries of the global south?
So that question's more complicated to answer, probably more qualified for somebody from a purchasing team perspective. But at least for us, Pitt is a relatively large institution, and because of that, we have I don't want to say a fairly decent budget, but it's a non-insignificant budget. Um, we were quoted approximately $26,000 for about 27 licenses of 3D Organon. So it might be on a a case by case basis for somebody from the global south that might want to use this technology. There might be regional pricing or something like that. I'm not sure. But at least for us, we were able to afford it without much issue.
Yes, that clearly depends on the case, the number of devices, and the planning that we have with the institution each time. So we always try to accommodate each institution's needs whenever we face such issues. So moving on, we have a question. Where is a problem with visualization of ultrasound probe teaching prog on my Quest 2? Does it mean that all new updates will recommend to have Quest 3 or newer?
Um, what I can say about that is performance is dependent on how powerful your headset is. So if you're using the software on the Quest 2, your performance might not be as optimal as you would get with, say, the Quest 3 or the 3S. Um, so that would probably be more of a technical question for 3D Organon support, whether or not you can improve performance any further with your headset. We do have most of our fleet being Quest 3s, and we haven't really experienced any performance problems regarding the ultrasound module.
Yes, that is also something that the hardware companies recommend for its specific use. So I think also the companies of the hardware that you choose or already have are um, to have a discussion with them and have suggestions on that matter as well. So we have a very practical question. What do you do in terms of hygiene on the headsets? Washable silicone covers, disposable covers, and what do you use?
Excellent question. So for hygiene purposes, we have essentially anti-back wipes that we use to wipe the headsets off every time someone's done using it. If somebody comes in with makeup or they don't want to touch the headset directly, we also have essentially face masks for just your eyes. So it covers kind of just like the area where the headset gasket touches your face. So if someone's wearing makeup, it won't get on the headset, or like if someone has really oily skin, it won't, cause any problems or anything like that. It's up to the comfort of that end user. We also have storage of our headsets in ultraviolet cases. So you can close the headset storage case, turn on the ultraviolet light for 5 minutes, and it will completely disinfect all of the headsets at the same time.
Great, thank you for that. And we also have another question from earlier about assessments. Are you doing any exams with the headsets?
This upcoming semester for nursing is going to be the first time we are doing formal assessments with the headsets.
Are you going to be using our examverse module or the quizzes module? Would you care to
Um,
elaborate?
Yeah, so nursing is going to be using it for patient simulation more so
Mhm.
than gross human anatomy. So since patient sim isn't really a strong suit of 3D Organon software, we're going to be using a different piece of software for that. But if there was someone that wanted to use 3D Organon for anatomy coverage, their module is great for that. You can customize basically everything you want about the quizzing and assessment modules that way. Um, we don't we haven't purchased the Examverse module, but from what I've seen in the earlier demos with the products, you can customize your own questions and make your own your own quizzes and assessments and that
Mhm.
type of thing.
That is correct. So if you have any further questions, we have our Q&A and chat open. Okay. Um, so Alexei, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your valuable experience with us today. We truly appreciate your work and we wish you continued success in your projects and career. A team is always happy to support you. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We're so glad you could be part of this session with us. The webinar recording will be available soon on our YouTube channel as well. Certificates of attendance will be shared shortly after the event. Be sure to follow us on social media and stay tuned on our news and updates for more upcoming events. At 3D Organon, we're incredibly excited to continue making medical education more immersive, engaging, and accessible. Thank you once again, and we look forward to our next webinar.
Thank you so much, guys. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.